If you had the ability to manipulate and grow plants, what would you do with it? Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. Poison Ivy is one of the most underrated characters over at DC Comics and definitely one of the most underrated villains, especially considering how powerful she can be. But main continuity Ivy isn't the only most dangerous version of the character around. Number 10. DCAU. In the main animated universe known as the DCAU, the DC Animated Universe, Poison Ivy isn't quite as powerful as her comic book counterpart. She doesn't have the power to manipulate plants, but you know what's cool about her? She doesn't really need that. Here, Pamela actually relies on her smarts to get stuff done typically. She often makes her own poisons, toxins, and serums using plants, using her skills as a genius chemist and botanist to do so. Aside from that, Poison Ivy also is known for having an immunity to all poisons and toxins, even Joker gas. Ivy doesn't just have brains and toxic immunity though. She also has some bronze in this reality. This version of Ivy is also a skilled gymnast and comes armed with a wrist-mounted crossbow, which she occasionally uses. Later on, she also develops pheromones, which she often uses to make men do her bidding. A quite literal femme fatale. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, you should go check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. And when you head on over there, hit subscribe and let them know that Amanda sent ya. Number 9. Gotham by Gaslight. Even the old-timey Victorian version of Ivy is pretty cool. Gotham by Gaslight is a series and alternate Earth where Batman actually hunts Jack the Ripper in Gotham City. It is set in the 19th century, turn of the century sort of era. Here, Pamela Isley is also a baddie. She ends up appearing in Convergence Shazam issue number 2 instead of the main Gotham by Gaslight story. Here she is revealed to be one of the rogues of Batman from the Gotham by Gaslight reality. We also learn that she does in fact still have chlorokinesis powers, which I think is pretty neat. It should also be noted that there is in fact a Batman Gotham by Gaslight animated film as well, but for this point we're focusing on the version of the reality from the comics. So not to be confused with the animated film. Number 8. Arrowverse. I'm not sure if we are still calling it that or if we're calling it the CW verse at this point, but you know what I'm talking about here. Poison Ivy is a character who actually appears in the Batwoman series, first being mentioned in episode 13 of the second season, I'll Give You a Clue, and first appearing in the 8th episode of the third season of the series, Trust Destiny. She is portrayed by Bridget Riga in the show and, like her comic book counterpart, has chlorokinesis powers which allow her to command, create, and manipulate plant life. Ivy here, however, does not have pheromone powers, but instead hypnotism powers, which seemingly allow her to control those who lock eyes with her. However, even this power, like Ivy's pheromone powers in the comics, can be thwarted. Number 7. Young Justice. This alternate version of Ivy is definitely a villain, being a member of the Injustice League. She not only has her now typical chlorokinesis powers, but has also worked to create even more monstrous plants, enhancing them with various types of venom, tech, radiation, and magic, including even Joker venom. While Poison Ivy is a force to be reckoned with in this reality, she does ultimately get defeated by Young Justice. But hey, they're the main team of the animated series, and villains are basically designed to lose to heroes, especially if it's a hero-centric story. One of the things I really love about Ivy in the animated series Young Justice is her look. She has green markings on her face and her arms that look like vines almost on her green-hued skin. Number 6. Earth 43. One of the most despicable versions of Poison Ivy. This version hails from the home reality of the Red Rain series, the reality where Batman gets transformed into a vampire. Here, Poison Ivy is a serial killer who uses her powers to seduce men, making them want her desperately before she kills them with a single toxic kiss. Vampire Batman, however, quickly puts an end to Ivy. Here she has chlorokinesis as well, but his very presence causes harm to her plants, killing them. Despite her abilities, he defeats her easily enough by biting into her neck and decapitating her afterwards, you know, to make sure that she doesn't turn into a vampire. This version of Ivy both first appears and dies in Batman Crimson Mist. Number 5. Arkham Game. In the Arkham video game universe, Ivy becomes a somewhat redeemed figure. Initially, she is a villain, one of the criminals locked up in Arkham Asylum who ends up breaking free. But although she seems to identify more with nature than humanity, she still ends up helping to save Gotham in the end. even though she recently plotted the city's demise herself. Poison Ivy here is toxic to most people thanks to some accidental mad science, which caused her to turn into a plant-human hybrid. Instead of blood pumping through her veins, Ivy has chlorophyll. She also has pheromone powers, which here make her a master of seduction. Poison Ivy teams up with Batman in the end in this reality to help him defeat Scarecrow's fear toxin, even sacrificing herself to Number 4, New Earth. Similar to her animated counterpart, Poison Ivy in the previous continuity of New Earth was not as powerful as the current version of her that we have in the comics. At least, not initially. Originally, her abilities were more based in the realm of science and her knowledge, but following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, she gained more superpower-based abilities. Her chlorokinesis in the New Earth continuity seems to be somewhat mystical in origin post-Crisis, actually being tied to the green, which is the same force that grants the powerhouse of Swamp Thing his powers. She also ends up developing pheromone control that allows her to seduce not just men, but people of all genders. She can control her green-hued skin, reducing its pigmentation, allowing her to move through a crowd unnoticed, and she can absorb the toxins of animals and plants to make her touch more deadly. Number 3, Lady of the Forest. It's possible that this version of Ivy is even more powerful than she seems in the comics. She hails from the reality belonging to the Dark Knights of Steel series, which sets up the DC universe in a more medieval and fantasy-based setting. Here Ivy is known as the Lady of the Forest, protecting Hob Forest out of love for the court jester Harley Quinn. While her power is really shown to only have reach in the forest in the series, it is more magic based in this reality, and it could potentially reach further than that. It could be just Ivy doesn't want to reach further than that. She helps the House of L, but she doesn't actually do it out of love for them, but only out of love for Harley. Number 2, Harley Quinn animated series. One of the most powerful versions of Ivy when it comes down to it is from the Harley Quinn animated series. While a humorous and comical show filled with zany antics and tons of jokes, Ivy's power is not to be laughed at here. In fact, it seems as though a few different versions of the character were combined together to give us this powerhouse version that ends up becoming Harley Quinn's best friend and later her girlfriend. Here Ivy has powers of chlorokinesis and pheromone control. Although her pheromone powers actually also cause her victims to transform into trees and eventually die. Which could be a plus, could be a minus, depending on how you see that. Much darker than the comics for sure. Poison Ivy here can also heal from pretty much anything, even seemingly coming back from the dead, so long as she's buried in fresh soil, which seems to allow her to regenerate, which is pretty cool. Number 1, Prime Earth. Technically, this version of Poison Ivy isn't a variant because she's the main continuity version from the comics, who we now consider to be the Prime version, but she's really powerful, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention her on this list. So we're gonna talk about her. She's making my cut anyway. You're just gonna have to deal with it because she's too good for me to not talk about her. The current main continuity version of Poison Ivy is similar to her New Earth counterpart, but her power levels are on a different scale. She was never able to stick to walls, sadly though. Yeah, that was the thing that New Earth Ivy could do pre-Crisis, which was pretty weird, but also kinda interesting. This version of Ivy was powerful enough to at one point use her abilities to control all of the people of the world through the greens that they ate. What's even more crazy is she was actually talked out of ruling the world, as that was really the only way to defeat her at that point. That's how powerful she was. She had such immense control over supremely powerful beings as well, like Superman. This version of Ivy can also connect to other plants through the green, allowing her to perceive many different places around the world through the shared consciousness of plant life. And because she is connected to the green, she can never really die either, like her Harley Quinn animated series counterpart. Kinda like Swamp Thing as well, she can kind of always come back because she kind of exists in plant life, you know what I mean? So I've started collecting the new Poison Ivy series, by the way, and I'm super excited to finally start reading it soon. I have such a backlog of comics to read right now. Ivy deserves more love in the comics, that is for sure. And did you know that that's her first solo book? That's crazy to me. Like, it's 2022, what are we doing here? Till next time, thank you so much for watching, and as always, stay nerdy, YouTube.